The day began like any other in New York City. Yellow cabs honked, people hurried along sidewalks, coffee in hand. The sky above was a clear, bright blue. No one suspected a thing. Then it happened. A shimmer, a distortion in the fabric of the sky. It was almost invisible at first, like heat rising from asphalt on a summer day. But this was different. This felt wrong. The air grew still. Birds stopped singing. A strange silence fell over the usually noisy city. People looked up, a sense of unease prickling their skin. The shimmer grew larger. It pulsed with an unnatural light. It looked like a giant invisible hand was tearing the sky apart. The blue began to crack. Strange colors, colors not of this world, leaked through the tear. Greens and purples swirled like a cosmic bruise. The rip widened slowly, ominously. It was a silent scream against the peaceful morning. Below, the city that never sleeps held its breath. Phones came out, not for selfies, but to capture the impossible. What was happening above their heads was beyond anything they had ever imagined, beyond their wildest nightmares. Fear, cold and sharp, began to spread through the crowds. The tear was no longer subtle. It was a gaping wound in the sky, miles long. It throbbed with a strange energy, a silent promise of something terrible to come. The initial curiosity on people's faces turned to dread. Some pointed, their voices hushed whispers. Others simply stared, mouths agape, unable to process the sight. The laws of physics seemed to be breaking apart right before their very eyes. The air crackled with an unseen power. This was not a weather phenomenon. This was an invasion. The tear pulsed one final violent time. The edges glowed with an intense, sickly light. Then the first silhouette appeared. It was massive. It was monstrous. It was something utterly alien. The silence of the city was finally broken. It was broken by a collective gasp of terror. Then came the screams. The impossible had become real. The nightmare had arrived. New York City, the vibrant heart of the world, was the first to witness the dawn of a new, terrifying age. The sky was bleeding and something dreadful was pouring out. Miles away, or perhaps just a thought away, Tony Stark was not enjoying a morning coffee. He was connected, always connected. His mind, augmented by his own genius, interfaced with a global network of sensors. His advanced AI, Friday, was his eyes and ears across the planet. The anomaly over New York did not escape his notice. Alarms blared not in a physical room, but within his consciousness. Friday's calm, synthesized voice reported the impossible with chilling precision. Energy signatures unlike anything ever recorded. A dimensional breach. He knew instantly this was not a drill. Stark was not physically in New York. He was at a secure, undisclosed location, but in moments, his presence would be felt. His latest suit, the Mark LXX-5, was a marvel of nanotechnology. It was more than armor, it was an extension of his will. Friday, give me visuals. Full spectrum, Stark commanded, his voice calm, but laced with an urgency that only global threats could inspire. He saw the tear, he saw the fear, he saw the dawning horror on the faces of innocent people. The weight of the world, a burden he knew too well, settled on his shoulders once more. Initiate remote deployment protocol. Send the Iron Legion. Scramble everything we have. This isn't a scouting party, Friday. This is an invasion, Stark ordered. His mind raced, calculating, analyzing. He was a planner, a builder, a futurist. He had prepared for countless doomsday scenarios. Alien invasion had always been high on that list. Yet seeing it unfold, the sheer scale of the tear sent a shiver down his spine. This was bigger than the Chitauri. This felt different, more sinister, more final. His work was never done. The Mark LX-5 suit, sleek and powerful, began to assemble itself in a hidden armory within Stark Tower. Nanites flowed like liquid metal, forming the iconic red and gold armor. It was empty, a shell, but it was a shell powered by Stark's intellect and Friday's sophisticated algorithms, a ghost in the machine ready for war. Tony Stark, the Man of Iron, was about to join the fight even from afar. He knew others would be needed. The world would need all its heroes for what was coming. But for now, he was the first line of defense. From the vibrant, sickening tier in the sky, the first invaders descended. They were the Zarnak, creatures born from a nightmare. They were not sleek or elegant. They were monstrous, hulking beasts easily 10 feet tall with chitinous armor the color of burnt obsidian. Their heads were too large for their bodies, dominated by a single glowing crimson eye that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. Multiple limbs, sharp as scythes, scraped against buildings as they landed, sending showers of concrete and glass onto the streets below. A guttural roar echoed through the canyons of Manhattan, a sound that promised only destruction. The Zarnak moved with a horrifying insect-like skittering. They were fast, unnaturally fast for their size. Their single crimson eye scanned their surroundings, taking in the chaos, the screaming humans. They seemed to feed on the fear. Smaller, winged Zarnak like grotesque insects poured from the tear next. They swarmed through the air, their leathery wings beating a deafening rhythm. These smaller creatures carried energy weapons, firing blasts of purple energy that exploded on impact, vaporizing cars and shattering storefronts. The invasion had truly begun. New York was their beachhead. These aliens were not just brutes. There was a terrifying intelligence in their actions. They moved with purpose, spreading out, securing territory. The larger Zarnak acted as shock troops, smashing through obstacles, while the winged warriors provided air support and rained down destruction. Their armor seemed to shrug off small arms fire from the first responding police officers. Conventional weapons were proving useless against these otherworldly horrors. Panic turned into sheer, unadulterated terror. The Zarnak were a force of nature, a plague unleashed upon the unsuspecting earth. Their nature was one of conquest, pure and simple. They communicated in a series of harsh clicks and deep growls, but their intent was clear. Annihilation, domination. They did not seek to parley. They did not offer terms. They were here to take. As more and more Zarnak poured from the celestial wound, the sky above New York darkened with their numbers. The city's iconic skyline was rapidly becoming a hunting ground for these alien predators. The scale of the threat was becoming terrifyingly apparent. This was not just an attack, it was an extermination. The streets of New York City, once a symbol of human achievement and vibrant life, transformed into a war zone. Cars lay overturned, burning. Sirens wailed, a mournful song against the backdrop of alien roars and explosions. People ran. They screamed. They hid. The Zarnak were relentless. Their crimson eyes seemed to pierce through any cover. They smashed through walls, tore open subway entrances, and dragged people from their hiding places. The sheer brutality was shocking. This was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The city was bleeding, and its people were desperate. Tony Stark's Iron Legion drones arrived, a swarm of red and gold. They engaged the winged Zarnak in the skies, repulsor blasts meeting alien energy fire. Explosions lit up the smoke-filled air. The drones, controlled by Friday under Stark's direction, fought valiantly. They managed to take down some of the smaller Zarnak, buying precious seconds for civilians to escape. But for every alien felled, two more seemed to take its place. The remote-piloted Mark LX-5, Stark's main suit, landed with a thunderous impact in Times Square, immediately drawing the attention of several larger Zarnak. "All right, ugly, party's over." Stark's voice filtered through the suit's speakers, echoed through the square. He unleashed a torrent of firepower, missiles, lasers, repulsor rays. The Zarnak were tough, their armor deflecting some of the blasts, but Stark's technology was formidable. He took down one, then another. Yet, the numbers were overwhelming. Even with the Iron Legion, he was just one man, controlling an army of machines against an endless tide of monsters. He knew this was a holding action at best. He needed backup. He needed the Avengers. The initial shockwave of the invasion crippled communications. Emergency services were overwhelmed. The city's infrastructure was crumbling. Bridges became choke points, then death traps as Zarnak forces targeted them. Subways became tombs. The sheer scale of the destruction was hard to comprehend. Iconic landmarks were defaced or destroyed. The Statue of Liberty, a beacon of hope, watched as darkness fell upon the city. New York was fighting for its life, but it was a fight it could not win alone. The heart of the city was being torn out by alien claws. The horror was not confined to New York. As the tear above Manhattan continued to spew forth Zarnak, similar rifts began to open across the globe. London was next. Over the historic city, the sky fractured. The familiar gray clouds were torn asunder by another pulsating, sickly green wound. The people of London, having seen the first horrifying images from New York broadcast across news channels, knew what was coming. A wave of preemptive panic swept through the city. The Thames, usually a calm river, seemed to churn with an unseen dread as the first shadows fell from the sky. Big Ben's chimes were interrupted by the guttural roars of the Zarnak. They descended upon Parliament Square, their monstrous forms clashing horrifically with the ancient architecture. The red phone boxes became useless symbols of a connected world now facing disconnection. The Zarnak in London seemed just as brutal, just as efficient as their New York counterparts. They smashed through the historic streets, their scythed limbs tearing apart double-decker buses and black cabs. The Queen's Guard, brave but hopelessly outmatched, found their ceremonial weapons utterly ineffective against the alien onslaught. The initial response in London was chaotic. Unlike New York, where Stark's drones provided some early resistance, London felt defenseless. The military scrambled fighter jets, but the winged Zarnak proved to be agile and deadly adversaries in the air. Dogfights erupted over the city, explosions blooming like deadly flowers in the sky. But the alien numbers were too great. One by one, jets were swatted from the sky, crashing into landmarks and residential areas, adding to the inferno that was consuming the city. London Bridge was not falling down, it was being torn apart. The famous London Underground, a labyrinth beneath the city, became a desperate refuge. Thousands fled underground, hoping to escape the carnage above, but the Zarnak were intelligent. They soon found the entrances. Screams echoed in the tunnels as the invaders began to hunt in the darkness. The city that had endured the Blitz now faced a threat from beyond the stars, a threat that seemed unstoppable. The spirit of London was strong, but even the strongest spirit can be broken by such relentless, overwhelming terror. The sky above was no longer London's, it belonged to the Zarnak. Section 6. Tokyo's Terrifying Dawn. As London reeled, the sun was rising over Tokyo. But this dawn brought no hope. It brought another tear. This one ripped open the sky directly above the bustling Shibuya crossing. The usually vibrant, neon-lit district was plunged into an eerie alien glow. The thousands of pedestrians who normally navigated the famous scramble crossing froze, their faces upturned in disbelief and horror. The scene was surreal. Giant advertising screens flickered, showing news reports of New York and London, and then, the live feed of their own city's doom began. The Zarnak that emerged over Tokyo seemed almost to revel in the dense urban environment. They leaped from skyscraper to skyscraper, their massive forms casting long, terrifying shadows. The intricate network of streets and elevated highways became a deadly playground for the invaders. Bullet trains, symbols of Japan's technological prowess, were derailed and torn apart. The Tokyo Skytree, a modern marvel, was quickly swarmed by winged Zarnak, its lights extinguished as they used it as a perch to survey their new domain of destruction. The precision and order of Japanese society shattered into a million pieces. Japan's self-defense forces mobilized rapidly. Tanks rolled through the streets, soldiers took up positions. But like elsewhere, their conventional weaponry struggled against the Zarnak's advanced armor and overwhelming numbers. The creatures seemed almost impervious to bullets and standard explosives. Each Zarnak warrior was a walking tank, a biological weapon of immense power. The disciplined defense lines were broken, overrun by the sheer ferocity of the alien attackers. The city's dense population meant that civilian casualties were horrifically high from the outset. The cultural heart of Tokyo was also under attack. Ancient temples and serene gardens, places of peace and reflection, were desecrated by the invaders. The contrast between the Zarnak's brutal ugliness and the delicate beauty of Japanese culture was stark and heartbreaking. The screams in Tokyo were no different from those in New York or London. Fear was a universal language, and the Zarnak were fluent in eliciting it. Tokyo, a city known for its resilience in the face of natural disasters, now faced an unnatural one, a cataclysm from the stars. Section 7. A world united by fear. The news spread like wildfire. New York, London, Tokyo. Then reports started flooding in from other major cities. Paris, with a tear gaping over the Eiffel Tower. Moscow, where the Kremlin itself was under assault. Rio de Janeiro, where the Christ the Redeemer statue watched Zarnak swarm the beaches. Sydney, where the Opera House became a battleground. It was a coordinated global invasion. No corner of the earth felt safe. The Zarnak were everywhere, their terrifying crimson eyes becoming a symbol of impending doom for all humanity. This wasn't just an attack on a few cities, it was an assault on civilization itself. Panic gripped the planet, stock markets crashed, governments struggled to maintain order as citizens fled major urban centers, creating unprecedented refugee crises. Roads were clogged with desperate people trying to escape, but where was safe? The Zarnak seemed capable of striking anywhere. The initial shock gave way to a dawning, terrifying realization: humanity was outmatched. Our technology, our armies, our ingenuity, none of it seemed enough to stop these relentless invaders. The world, so often divided by politics and borders, found a grim unity in shared terror. World leaders convened emergency virtual summits, their faces grim. Accusations and blame were quickly set aside. The only topic was survival. How could they fight back? The Zarnak did not communicate, did not negotiate, they only destroyed. Military forces globally were put on the highest alert, but every report from the front lines was bleak. Casualties were mounting at an alarming rate, both civilian and military. The invaders' tactics were brutal and efficient, designed to sow maximum chaos and break the will to resist. The fabric of global society was tearing apart, much like the skies above their cities. The question on everyone's lips was, why? Why Earth? Were they after resources? Were they simply conquerors? Or was it something even more sinister? There were no answers, only the screams of the dying and the roar of the Zarnak. The invasion was not just a physical assault, it was a psychological one. Hope dwindled with each passing hour, with each new city that fell silent under the alien shadow. The world watched, prayed, and feared, wondering if this was how it all ended. The Zarnak were a storm and humanity was caught in its devastating path. Section 8, The Call to Arms. Back in his remote command center, Tony Stark watched the global catastrophe unfold. The Iron Legion, brave as it was being decimated. His remotely piloted suit in New York was taking heavy damage, its power reserves dwindling. He felt a frustration so profound it was almost a physical ache. He was one man, and this was a war for the world. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he couldn't do this alone, not even with all his technology. This was a job for more than just Iron Man. This was a job for the Avengers. Friday, Stark said, his voice heavy. Initiate the Avengers protocol. Send out the call to everyone. Tell them it's happening. The end of the world, unless we stop it. He knew some were off the grid, some were estranged. The team had faced its own fractures, but this threat transcended all of that. This was about the survival of the human race. He had to believe they would answer. He had to believe that when the world needed them most, they would come together. The alternative was unthinkable. The signal went out, a beacon of desperation but also of hope. It traveled across encrypted channels, seeking out heroes scattered across the globe, or perhaps even beyond it. It sought out a super soldier whose shield was a symbol of defiance. It sought a god of thunder whose hammer could summon storms. It sought a giant green rage monster whose strength was unparalleled. It sought a master spy whose skills were legendary. It sought a Hawkeye whose aim never missed. It sought anyone and everyone who could make a difference. The call was a plea, a desperate SOS from a dying planet. As the Zarnak continued their relentless advance, small pockets of resistance began to form. Ordinary people, inspired by the initial defiance of figures like Iron Man, fought back with whatever they had. Police officers, firefighters, even civilians, armed with courage more than weapons, tried to protect their loved ones, their homes. But their bravery, while inspiring, was not enough to turn the tide. They needed something more. They needed symbols. They needed power. They needed heroes. And as Stark's call echoed, a faint glimmer of hope began to pierce through the overwhelming darkness. Perhaps the Avengers would answer. Section 9. The Battle for Tomorrow. The initial hours of the invasion were a blur of chaos and destruction. Cities burned, millions, perhaps billions were in peril. The Zarnak were establishing footholds, their numbers seemingly endless as more poured from the tiers in the sky. Earth's defenses were crumbling. The invaders were not just winning, they were crushing humanity's spirit with terrifying efficiency. The crimson eyes of the Zarnak seemed to be everywhere, a constant reminder of the planet's grim new reality. This was not a fight Earth was prepared for. This was an extinction-level event unfolding in real time. Yet as Tony Stark's call for aid resonated, something began to shift. Not a massive change, not yet, but a flicker. Reports started trickling in, unconfirmed at first. A figure wielding a shield organizing survivors in the rubble of Brooklyn. Strange lightning storms striking down Zarnak forces in the Midwest. A green behemoth seen leaping through the devastated streets of Washington, D.C., smashing alien war machines. Whispers of a red-caped figure appearing in the skies over Europe, a blur of motion bringing down Zarnak flyers. The heroes were responding, they were coming. The fight was far from over, in fact it was just beginning. The Zarnak were deeply entrenched, their numbers vast. The tiers in the sky remained open, portals for endless reinforcements. What humanity had witnessed so far was merely the vanguard, the first wave designed to break them. What horrors still lurked beyond those dimensional rifts? What was the ultimate goal of these monstrous invaders? The questions loomed, unanswered and terrifying. But now there was a chance, a slim, desperate chance, but a chance nonetheless. The battle for New York, for London, for Tokyo, for every city, town and village on Earth was about to enter a new, even more brutal phase. It would be a war fought not just by soldiers and machines but by gods, monsters and legends. The Avengers were assembling, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The Zarnak had brought war to Earth, seeking to claim it as their own. But Earth had protectors, and they would not yield. The fate of the planet hung precariously in the balance. The biggest battle for tomorrow had just begun.